Hey everyone, and welcome back to Underrated to Unstoppable. It's your time to shine with me, Charlene Wheeless. Today's conversation is one you don't want to miss. I'm sitting down with Candace Steele Flippin, an executive, entrepreneur, and researcher who is truly a force for change in the field of women's success. We're diving into the difference between confidence and self-efficacy, and why self-efficacy, that deep belief that you will succeed, is even more powerful when it comes to winning in life and leadership. Candace shares her incredible journey from building a career in corporate leadership and executive leadership to launching her own successful ventures, plural, and offers real actionable insights into what it takes to thrive, especially when the odds seem stacked against you. It's honest, inspiring, and filled with wisdom you'll want to hit rewind on. So grab a cup of coffee or some other beverage, settle in, and jump into this conversation with Candace.
A while back, I saw this quote, and I haven't researched it, but it was from Rockefeller, and it was just, we often hear how, one of the keys to success is confidence. Mm-hmm. And we all know a lot of confident women who are thriving. And so my body of work is around self-efficacy. My whole framework is around how do you boost, dial up, enhance your self-efficacy so that you can win in the difference. So I'm going to talk about why self-efficacy matters more than confidence when it comes to winning, particularly for women.
Okay. Well, and that'll be cool because, okay, great. So let me tell you about the show and stop filing this nail that I broke this morning that has been driving me crazy. Do you ever do that? You find something really small and you obsess over it?
Yes, unfortunately.
Right, exactly. Okay, stop, Charlene. So one, it's good to see you. You look great.
Thank you. So do you.
I can't wait to hear everything that's going on. So the one of the reasons why I need the form, so thank you for filling it out, is because I do all of the introductions separately. And the idea is with this, it's a YouTube series. And the idea is that people are just kind of dropping in on our conversation, right? So we'll talk about self-efficacy versus confidence, but it might take us in, any number of directions, or it might stay right where it is. And then the only requirement, of course, in the show is at the end, the last question with everybody is, tell me about the moment or the journey or when you knew that you were enough, or how you knew that you were enough, and kind of what changed for you. And for some people, quite frankly, it's been that they have always known they're enough. For others, it's been a journey. So for some people, it's been a moment. So whatever answer you have is fine. And so the reason why I decided to do the series, just to give you a little background, is because and I'm sure you see this too, and especially the women and other people you work with, it's like imposter syndrome is alive and well. And so many people, though, who are experiencing imposter syndrome think that they're alone, right? Maybe because it's somebody, they don't see anybody like them who acknowledges it, or whatever it is. So I got up one morning and said, what can I do that fits in with this, but then also, but really benefits other people? So that's how this was born while I was brushing my teeth one morning. And I thought, if I do this, this would be really great because one, it gives people a platform to talk about what they do. The other is because we're answering the question around, you are enough. Maybe someone will see this and identify with someone that I'm interviewing with and realize that they're not alone. They're not flawed, that, it's all going to be okay.
Right.
Right. So that's how this whole thing got started and was born. And I see I'm actually a little bit too tall here.
I'm sorry, I'm just changing the light here. I'm looking at my light and it's, there we go.
So,
Oh,
so that's the whole premise of the show. No pressure, nothing. Everything is, it is all edited, so it doesn't matter what you say. If you say something inappropriate, we get that taken care of, no problem. And like I said, it's just the idea is that people have just dropped in on our conversation.
okay, fantastic.
Okay. And so feel free to ask any questions anytime because we just, like I said, we're just having a conversation. So what have you been up to? That's what's most important. What have you been doing?
Scaling my business.
Yeah. So, or
Yeah,
business or businesses, because you're one of the busiest entrepreneurs I know.
that is true. I do have a wide portfolio, but right now it's really taking my IP around shape and that concept and scaling it. And so there's a scaling it with women who are working directly with me as a part of a cohort.
Mm-hmm.
I developed an assessment and all these tools that
Right.
had previously been licensed with another organization.
Right.
That contract, they wanted 3 years. I intentionally made it two. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm scaling it. And next month, I'll be launching a certification program
Uh-huh.
to get others certified on this methodology so they can then
Uh-huh.
use it in their practice.
Okay. And so are you still calling it shape or are
Yep,
you
shape
some
career assessment because that's what's registered at the U.S. Patent Office. So it's the
Mhm.
shape career
Mhm.
assessment. My program where women work with me is called the Shape Career Accelerator, and that's
Uh-huh.
trademarked. So, but working its way through, who knows now? One
Right,
knows
right.
another day.
Yeah, definitely that's true.
But and then as soon as I finish that, I will be launching the summer program for girls.
Okay. Oh, that
And
sounds
then
interesting. Tell me about that.
So a lot of women have said, I have a young girl. Do you have a program for girls? Because I would love for my daughter to know these principles as she
Mm,
goes through high school, leaves high school. And so she has the foundation early on. And I
right.
wrote a program, I just didn't have the time. So
Hmm.
then I'm going to look at scaling and launching that because in the March, April timeframe is when women will start looking for summer programs. If some have already started, so I'm going to do it coming soon next week looking for a program for their girls. And
Okay.
so, and I'm right now wrestling with do I want to make it online or do I want to go to certain cities? And
Hmm.
I'm thinking, I might go to certain cities and it'll be like a weekend program.
Right. Right.
And women can
Okay.
come drop their so yeah. So and then I'm taking this methodology and I've now started workshopping it,
Hmm.
mixed groups, and then I'm going to redo the study, include men in it. So yeah,
Hmm.
looking to scale it. My goal is 100 women working with me, 20 companies engaging with me, and 100 coaches using the program.
Oh my gosh.
So
So
yeah,
those are great goals, right? And anybody would
yeah,
say that they're smart goals if you follow along that, right? So
yeah.
so by when? Is that your 2025 goal or
2025 goal.
okay, because I know you've always been aggressive in your goal
Yeah,
setting. So,
yeah, that's my
yeah.
goal.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so, are you doing anything else other than what you're doing around shape or?
Um, so well, I'm trying to make it all work so I'm not helter skelter. So
Right.
organizations are still talking to me. So then in my company, Global Career Advancement Institute or Global
Mhm.
CAI, I'm working with other thought leaders to help them, amplify their voice. That's going
Okay.
slower than I want. And so I decided for Q1 to focus on getting mind scale because I was losing
Mhm.
time. And
Right.
what I start to appreciate is not everyone is entrepreneurial or can be an
Right.
entrepreneur. It's tough.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so like moving forward, I need to make sure that I do some things with people ahead of time
Hmm.
so that I can get them more entrepreneurial mindset. But that's my goal is to have 10 advisors in global CI among different areas of helping
Hmm.
people achieve a career success.
Okay. And do you
And then
find, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then also thinking about getting placed on a board, but I've put them on the
Mhm.
back burner a little bit because I've got to scale my own business.
Right, right. Yeah. And, I find that, every other day I have a new idea about my business, right? Ooh, what if I do this? What if I did that? What if I do this? And you find that, especially, in our backgrounds and communications, you find that if you're not too careful, you've got all these ideas and you're going in 1,000 different directions, but you aren't actually making progress on any of them. Right, not
Right.
meaningful
Focus.
progress, right?
Yes.
And so all the things we preach that we teach people, we do have to remember to do that ourselves, right?
Yes. Yes. The best strategies require focus. So,
Right, exactly. So I've been trying to say, okay, first quarter, it's this. Second quarter, let's get this off the ground and try not to get, swayed by the shiny new toy.
mhm.
Just curious, one thing I'd love to know if you've experienced this is, so what I found, and you and I both have spent, a good amount of time, the last half of our careers when we were in corporate as executives, is that I realized that I have, I'm going to call it ex-executivitis, right? So my term doesn't exist because I'm so used to coming up with ideas, but then you have people who execute them, right? And my dogs have proven to be insufficient interns. So I'm kind of like, because my husband said to me the other day, he's like, "Well, this is great, but who's going to execute all this stuff?" And I was like, "Oh,
Right.
yeah." Yeah, so that's kind of funny to me. So you are also a former C-suite executive, of course.
Yes.
And so, which do you like better, being incorporated? It serves its purpose in a time, of course. And now you're like you've dived into the entrepreneurial, but you're also an academic. So how do you blend all that together?
I felt my entire career that I have been an entrepreneur, and I knew at some point I would become one. My father was an entrepreneur.
Ah,
And
okay.
so he planted that seed in me very, very early on.
Mhm.
And even though I was rising through the ranks
Mhm.
throughout my career, like I owned rental properties. So I had other things that helped me this way. And then in my third, I think I shared with you in my 30s,
Mhm.
I started noticing that women were evaporating like every other quarter as
Right.
we started presenting earnings. And as I looked into it, these women were like age 50 and over.
Mhm. Ah,
And
okay.
I'm a younger person. I was
Mhm.
single. And I started watching what these women were doing after they got their letter. Because, we were in comms. So we would know it would be
Right.
coming. And some of these women, a lot of them were shocked. They hadn't planned. Some of them were married. Most of them
Mhm.
were single. Or the higher they were the principal breadwinner in their household.
Okay. Mhm.
And some of them had prepared and they were fine,
Mhm.
most not. And so they had to start their career over. And so I
Ah,
started thinking to myself, well, what could I do that will allow me to continue to have success both
mhm.
personally and professionally when I turn 50?
Right.
And then also in communications, particularly the areas that I worked in, I focused a lot on mergers and acquisitions
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
branding and crisis. And
Right.
so I thought to myself in my early 30s, 20 years from now, how many times will I want to explain why this innovation failed,
Right.
particularly
Right.
if someone's life was on the line
Mhm.
or something happening in the plant or something, will I still have that energy to be as creative as I always had been? And so I looked into it. And so I decided to do a couple things for myself. The first
Mhm.
thing I did is I started saving my money. I
Mhm.
went to see Ann Fudge speak. And these are all
Mhm.
things that happened in my late 20s, early 30s. And she talked about, she was one of the early first Black CEOs in a Fortune
Mhm.
500 company. And she talked about a decision she and her husband had made early where they had decided to not live above their means or
Mhm.
live in a way that if you looked at their social status, it would dictate it. And so the example she used was the home that they lived in.
Mhm.
And they probably had many homes, but there
Right.
was one that they had, and they decided at the time to not go up, like,
Right.
upsize.
Right. Well, yeah. Right.
It was probably a fabulous house. I never saw it, but
Mhm.
it made me think that perhaps I should figure out what my numbers are. What number do I really need to have a good lifestyle? And I'll save the rest. The
Ah,
second
okay.
decision that I made was what number do I need to thrive on when I get to my mid 50s?
Mhm.
and work with my financial advisor. And so once my salary hit that number for me, it's going to be different for everyone.
Right.
I started saving it, the rest of it. And then the other thing I noticed after 9/11, when so many people were displaced, I thought to myself, there are going to be ebbs and flows in the marketplace. And so it's possible that when I retire, we could be on a down cycle. So I need to start divesting all of my money that's in the market and reinvesting it in other things. And so for me, it was real estate. It was investing in other businesses like startups. And so I created this really diverse portfolio for myself. And then the last thing I did is I spoke to a recruiter about where he saw my profession going, corporate communications, corporate marketing. And he said to me, Candace, there are two ways to be really successful financially in your domain. One, you go to a company, you stay there your entire trajectory, you rise through the ranks, and then you're the executive, and then you get all these stock. And then when you retire, you have you have your all the other things, and then you have your stock. Or you find out what you're really good at. And you just keep doing it over and over again. And I found out I was good at managing and navigating change and helping companies tell their story in a compelling way to their stakeholders. So Wall Street, employees, leaders, to manage change. And that's how I started working with companies who are going through mergers and acquisitions or changing their business model. And then you do that. And at the end, the transaction happens. And usually, depending on where I was, that transaction would happen. My role would end, and then a recruiter would take me to another. And so that ended up with me working in finance. I started off, I guess, in pharma, biotech, medical device, financial services, and then ended up in industrials. And so that's why I've lived in so many places and worked in so many places. So that's my story. Have we started? Are we going now?
No, we started. We start taping from the moment.
Okay.
From the moment I come on.
So I'll speak more in sound.
No, I don't. I actually, because we're having a conversation, I don't want it to sound like an interview. So,
okay. So
yeah, you're perfect. That's why I start it this way, is because that it's conversational, because I don't want people to put on their professional mask, right? I want the reality. But Candace, something you said that I think is really interesting. This is kind of a dual question. Okay. So first off, and yes, only one of my hands is painted.
Trust.
I talk with my hands. I figured I'd just mess up.
No worries.
One, what 30-year-old is worried about her 50s? I mean, that's when you're 30, 50 is so far away, right? Mentally. So what made you think in your 30s about what kind of situation am I going to be in my 50s?
Oh, I can tell you. When I was in my 20s, I used to work for the American Red Cross. It was my second job out of college. And one of the roles that I had was to administer this grant. And this grant was for women who were in between. They were older women, but they weren't quite ready to get their Social Security. So they had this gap. And so this grant was to get them employed, so that they could have income, but bridge them.
Right.
And so I'm this young Candace Steele. I'm probably 23. And the Red Cross has lots of programs, and I also manage the volunteer program. And so I would go out into the community and try to get these other women placed. But then there would be these women who came in and they were volunteering. Maybe they were older women, and some of them were married and their husbands were retired. This is what they were doing, giving back to their community. Some of them were retired professional women. They were all really fabulous women. I adored them. And then there were these other women, and they would talk to me. And they would give me advice about my future. And the women who had planned well and were living like fabulously, they would talk to me about the choices they made. And then the women who were in this other program would also talk to me. And
Mm-hmm.
they would say, you're young, you're single, you never know where your life is going to go. Plan ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember going to HR to sign up for their equivalent of a 401k,
Mm-hmm.
because at the time they had a pension,
Right.
which was a defined retirement plan. Where at the end of a certain period, you would get money.
Right. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember going, and the HR director at that time, I said, oh, sign up for the 403b.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, well, we have a pension. I'm like, yes, but I want to be able to have more. And
Mm-hmm.
he was like, but Candy, you're so cute and you're young. You're going to get married and your husband's going to take care of you.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And if you read my third book, you would know I was like a financial black sheep. So, like, okay, I'll keep my money. And later that day, his assistant came to my cube and she
Uh-huh.
said, listen, I overheard your conversation. And you know what? He never does that to the men, only the women. And she said, listen, I'm about to retire. And I wish when I was 23, I had prepared better. I'm good. She said, here are the papers. I'm going to stand here and you fill them out.
Interesting.
And then I'm going to go process them for you.
Uh-huh.
So I took them, filled them out.
Yeah.
But that set me on my way. So very early on, I knew that things could change. And
Right.
so fast forward a decade later, I'm watching these amazing women,
Mm-hmm.
many who are role models for me, lose their roles because, whatever we called it back then, right sizing,
Right.
whatever
Mm-hmm.
we called it back then. And I thought about those other women and
Right.
to me.
Interesting. I had early on someone said to me, the only thing worse than being a woman in corporate is being an old woman. And I
Mm.
think she was describing old as, 60 plus, and at the time it didn't mean anything to me because I figured I'd always be in corporate. I'd always be young and cute, right? I wasn't gonna
And
any
you still are.
well, that 50 is looking young now, now that I'm
And it
over that,
is.
so, so that's really interesting. So if you haven't, send that woman a thank you note, right? Because now
Mhm.
you're well situated for doing everything that you're doing. And, I've always been a fan of yours, so I love everything that you do, Candace. And,
Thank you.
you
Thank
know,
you.
I love the idea of shape, but I really love something that you said to me when we first started talking, which is self-efficacy is not the same thing as confidence,
Right.
and that you need efficacy more than you need confidence. I may not have said that right, so I'll let you say it. So let's talk about that a little bit because most people, I think that they are one and the same or that they come together, right? Like if you are confident, you can be self-sufficient. Right. So give me your take on that, because I think that's an interesting distinction that you're making.
I believe having confidence is great and essential,
Hmm.
but I believe self efficacy is even better than confidence. Having self efficacy, having high self efficacy is even better than having high self confidence.
And how are
And
we defining self-efficacy?
so let's start with confidence. Confidence
Okay.
is just your belief in yourself.
Right.
Your belief in yourself. Self efficacy is your belief that you'll win.
Uh,
So more, more academically, your belief that you will be able to perform a task well.
okay. Yeah.
So, confidence will get you going.
Hmm.
Self-efficacy will get you to walk in the door.
Okay. So then is efficacy synonymous with courage, or is it something different?
Self-efficacy could be viewed somewhat as courage. I'll give you an example, a more practical example of how we
Right.
see it show up. Have you ever wanted to do something, no matter what it is? And I've seen your TEDx talk and read your book, so I know the answer, but just
Yeah,
for those
right. But
watching,
right.
have you ever wanted to do something and you shared it and someone said, well, you can't do that. And you went and did it anyway?
Yeah. Well, every damn day. Yeah.
That's an example of you having high self-efficacy, like your belief that if you try something,
Hmm.
you are going to succeed. It's going to work
Right.
out,
Hmm.
right? Or have you ever heard this expression that if a woman sees a job opportunity and she looks at the job opportunity and then she looks at her resume or thinks about her experience and she looks and she's trying to get every line to match up.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
so the job requires 5 years and she has like 4 years and 360 days. Oh, so close. I'm not going to do it. I'm not ready yet.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. That's an example of her self efficacy holding her back.
Okay.
She won't believe, even though she's very qualified.
Right.
Everyone around her is saying, do it. But her self efficacy is just not quite enough because she doesn't believe at that risk or
Hmm.
something in her background is keeping her from pushing the button.
Right.
Whereas men generally have higher self efficacy, they may see one or two lines or no lines, and they're like, I
Right.
can be
Right.
a
And they're like,
CEO.
I want it, so I'm going for it. Right.
Yeah. So, your confidence, your belief in yourself will get you to look at the job description.
Mhm.
It's your high self efficacy that'll allow you to push submit. Might work.
That's a great way to put it. So I wonder though, I mean, you're an academic, you've done research. I mean, you're not just an academic, obviously. Um, but I sometimes wonder, because we've heard the statistics about, for men, it's like, I'll figure it out when I get there, right? For women, it's, well, I need to know everything if I don't do it. And so, in order to apply, where does that actually come from? Like, is that learned because of our experience in the workplace? Is it something else? Is it just internal? I mean, we can't go back to the beginning of time of how this worked, but where do you think that initially comes from, or why we still hold on to that?
So I believe that a lot of it is how we're socialized in modern culture and in Western culture,
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
women are raised to um, act in a certain way and
Hmm.
not to assert ourselves. And so, from a
Right.
very young age, young girls can start to start doubting themselves, act like,
Right.
maybe she naturally exerts herself. No, dude, act like a little
Mhm.
lady.
Right.
I focus a lot on generational values, but
Mhm.
every time we're correcting these younger girls or we've been
Mhm.
corrected ourselves, um, we start to doubt.
Right.
And then there are other things that come up that causes us to doubt ourselves,
Mhm.
appearance, body shaming, all of these things. And we often forget that it was only like in the 70s when women started in mass coming into a lot of these environments,
Mhm.
academia, and now we're accelerating our positions in a lot of places, but a lot of us are still raised a certain way. And
Mhm.
so we see younger girls and ourselves, we are evaluated and
Mhm.
judged on how we use our voice, and most time not to use our voice. And
Right.
so it just creates this hesitancy.
Mhm.
Whereas men are encouraged to take risks. Men
Right.
are encouraged to fall down, dust themselves off, and get back
Mhm.
up.
Right.
And because in mass, in many professions, there are more males, which is
Mhm.
fine, than others. Sometimes women are newer to or the only, so we feel a lot of pressure to succeed. And
Right.
so we're afraid to fail. And
Mhm.
that intense pressure then causes doubt. So when we want to take a risk,
Mhm.
you use the word courage to do that. Our self efficacy isn't quite high enough to make us move forward. And
Mhm.
that's what I've seen in terms of
Mhm.
my research.
So there's also been this viewpoint, and research has proven this out, and um, previous research, I don't know how up to date it is, which is why I'm asking you the question, is, there's always been this view that women are punished for their failures in the workplace, and men are rewarded because it was a great learning opportunity, right? He
Yes.
learned, she failed. Um, to me, that helps drive also this fear of failure for women. It's like, I can't afford to fail because failing will derail me. It's not going to propel me. Does
Yes.
does that still exist? And how do we as women work through that other than I think the way that we've worked through it for most of our careers is we make sure we don't fail, right? But that has its own problems. So how do we work through that and build our self-efficacy?
Well, so there's so many ways, so many
Mhm.
ways. And so the first question, yes, it still exists because
Mhm.
we've seen examples of men failing and then winning again, right?
Right, right.
We've seen that.
Mhm.
Less so women because we just haven't had the time
Mhm.
and significant presence in those roles over time. And so most times when women ascend, they've been the first.
Right, right.
And in a lot of cases, maybe the only.
Mhm.
And so if she fails, there's this thought process that, oh, she's somehow representing all
Oh,
women,
woman.
and
Yeah.
perhaps we won't give her another
Mhm.
chance. So it's still going to happen until we reach those numbers en masse.
Right.
I often tell the women who I work with or when I'm advising leaders that I wish I could do something about every bias or ism that we see, but my
Is
research is really
mhm.
around things that you can do yourself to dial up your self efficacy. So, my first
Mhm.
message is do it anyway. Just
Right,
try
right.
anyway. Dust yourself
Mhm.
off, pick yourself up, and try again.
Mhm.
But in my research, I focus in 5 areas.
Mhm.
And, I have a nifty acronym. It's
Oh,
called
of
SHAPE,
course.
but
Uh-huh.
I'll try to walk you through it. So the first
Okay.
is around having a strong financial foundation.
Okay.
And when a woman has a strong financial foundation, she will be willing to take a risk and dust herself off
Mhm.
because she knows that she's going to be okay financially. And the
Okay.
reason why that's important is because most women are today the primary breadwinner in their household
Right. Mhm.
or a significant contributor. So if something happens to her income, it
Mhm.
could devastate her or her family. So she's not going to take a risk. But
Right.
if your financial foundation is robust, then you would take a risk. You pick yourself back up because you know your family or you're going to be okay. So one of
Right.
the things that I encourage women to do is to do whatever you can to increase your financial literacy and build a strong financial
Mhm.
foundation for yourself, whatever it means for you.
Right.
The next thing I talk to women about is letting them know that hard work is actually subjective. And what I love about women, and I'm going to be biased here, is we are
Mhm.
so hardworking.
Right.
The challenge is it's subjective. And so
Right.
when we get out of alignment with the person who's evaluating us, or the person who's in the ear of the person who's
Mhm.
evaluating us, or those persons, then what we want doesn't always work out. And the way I've seen it play out in my research and even as a leader is people will say, I don't understand. Like I'm doing everything I can. I did this, I did this, I did this, but I didn't get a raise, I didn't get the
Mhm.
promotion, I didn't get the
Mhm.
job. Meanwhile, this here does a fraction of what I've done
Right.
or none of it, and yet they're moving. And
Mhm.
so getting people to understand that hard work is actually objective. It's more important to be aligned. And I also want to just put a pin in this point. I'm not saying don't work hard,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Women, we're going to show up and do that anyway.
Right. Right.
But
Mhm.
it's really to be that having that alignment is what's important. And you have to always reset it.
Right.
The,
So what does that mean though? Because now the one I agree with you wholeheartedly. I remember, early on, and I talked about this in my book as well, and I'm sure you've talked about it, is that, we're told, go to work, put your head down, work really hard, right? And you're going to be successful. And I always tell people that's like the worst advice, career advice I think you can give anybody, right? So, because it's not just about working hard, but what do you mean by making sure how you work is in alignment? Are you saying, recognize that it's not just about hard work? recognize um, what your company says counts for being able to ascend, but pay attention to what really counts when it comes to ascension. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but these are thoughts that come to me.
So yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
And
Right.
so I asked women, like over 1,000 women, what is the worst career advice you've ever received?
Mhm.
And it was that was supposed to be helpful, but was actually more harmful.
Right. That's
And overwhelmingly, as I'm going through, and these were open-ended questions, it was around this whole concept of hard work. It was
Mhm.
completely around the concept of hard work. And it's some women called it a myth, some
Mhm.
women call it their biggest disappointment. And it was real. And as I dug into it and started having interviews, it was really around the fact that it is so subjective. And
Mhm.
so, what I mean is being aligned with the person who's evaluating you, asking questions
Mhm.
about what they expect. What does good look like? What does success look like?
Oh,
What are
to
you looking
them.
for to
Right.
them?
Okay.
To them,
Good point.
and getting a sense of who's in their ear, also critiquing it
Mhm.
so that you can make sure that it's aligned. The way it's worked out, I think, even through the arc of my career, there have been times when I've been very aligned, and I can think of times when I haven't been aligned.
Mhm.
And what I now talk to people about is having systems in place where you can get really good feedback loops.
Mhm.
And sometimes managers don't like to give bad feedback. The research shows that most people actually don't even like feedback, even when they ask for it. And
Right.
so having these feedback mechanisms, whether it's other people you're going to,
Mhm.
ways, as you are having meetings and you're giving the strategy or talking about the project or the tactics and saying what's missing,
Mhm.
using, military techniques where you have like, red and blue teams or
Mhm.
and your job is to say what's working, your job is to say what's not coming together,
Right.
finding ways to get that information so that that there's some alignment there, because a lot of people will say to me, I don't understand how this happened. My boss said I was doing a good job, and here I am out. I was the top performer. I went to the President's Club last year with my
Right.
sales number. Why
Mhm.
am I getting laid off? So it's just making sure you have that alignment, and it's going to be different for
Mhm.
everyone. The last thing I'll just say is I've
Mhm.
seen a lot of women and young men as well, and probably older men, but my research doesn't focus there as much,
Mhm.
um, overdoing. So the boss will say, I need 5, and then you give them 10.
Uh, yeah.
And then they're shocked when the 10 isn't received well.
Mhm.
And so just really making sure that you're not also overdoing things to a point where it could be perceived as wasting time or not focusing on the right things.
Right. So, and I know you have 5, and I actually do want to hear the other 3, but so one thing that comes to mind is, you and I, our whole career has been in communications, and some organizations understand communications, some organizations don't, right? And so one of the ways that and things that I've always talked about is making sure you set your strategy and your measures, right? So that people know what to measure you on. And, one of the reasons why I've always done that is because, the thing about communications is that everybody thinks they can do it, right? And they don't stop to think about, well, it's not really just writing a press release, there's more thought to it, there's more strategy to it. So it's important to, as I say, define or be defined. Now, how do you handle that in the workplace if let's say the person you work for has an old school view of your profession, right? So if you do that strategy where you're going to be viewed, where you say, here, measure me this way, which is strategically, and your boss is saying, okay, yeah, that's kind of whatever. I just need to make sure that you can put out a memo when I need it and, make sure these, brochures are done when we need them. Who the hell cares what they say, as long as they look good. Right. So that's clearly a mismatch, right? And I would think that, okay, you need to discover that mismatch before you even take the job. But what do you do if you're in the job and then discover the mismatch?
So this is something that, and I'm not sure if you were in this conversation where Marshall Goldsmith talked about this.
Yeah, I
The boss
interviewed
gets to
him. I
win.
I interviewed him. I was the one
Yeah,
interviewing him for this
yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
Yeah.
The boss gets to win. And so that's why, I focus on alignment, and it's terrible to say. So then you have options, right? So
Right.
the option is either you hope they change, or you leave.
Right.
And so the way that you change is to deliver the value that they want. So you're in alignment.
Hmm.
And don't forget your training and use it as a teaching or education, or mentorship
Hmm.
opportunity to help them
Right.
understand the value. What I've seen, I think early in my career, when I felt like, well, I'm right, it's really not about being right.
Hmm.
I got some counsel early in my career from a CEO. He was like, Candace, there's being right and there's being correct. And so he goes, and what you're doing is the right thing to do, but is it really the correct thing to do? And so I often think about that advice that I got probably 20 years ago,
Hmm.
um, when I'm talking to people, and I say, you know what? Everything you said is right.
Hmm.
But in that situation, if you really want to win and get alignment, think about what's the correct thing to do, because your boss is probably busy. They have a vision of what good looks like. So give them what their vision is. And at the same time, use it as an educational opportunity to help them understand how what this means also brings value. And everyone's going to learn differently. If you're hitting your head up against the wall and that person hasn't changed because they've probably been doing this a while, and that's how they've built in their mindset, and it's fixed now, right? It's not
Hmm.
it's fixed.
Right.
This
So
is
fixed
what
mindset.
it is,
Yeah.
and then that's the opportunity. And then you have to ask yourself, are you in a place where you can show up and do your best work? Now, there's some people who are listening to this thinking, oh man, there's got to be
Right.
a magic bullet, but you know,
Hmm.
I I believe that you could keep doing it your way,
Hmm.
but my research says you're not aligned. And
Right.
so think about strategies that you can put in place that can help them see bigger value.
Right.
I've done it in some ways where I've showed them the metrics, where I've said, you know what, you want us to just put out a memo. Well,
Right.
here's the metric. No one's reading the memos. Like
Right.
no one's
Right.
opening them.
Hmm.
However, maybe if you thought about the way communications work and you kind of, walk through communications
Right.
theory and all this stuff, whatever, but maybe there's someone else who can carry the message well. Perhaps we use a different strategy by talking to leaders and having the leaders cascade that message. And then we can go back and test and see if it gets amplified better. So
Right.
I'm going to give you your email but then we're going to
Right.
add these different steps so they feel
Mhm.
good. And then over time, you can coach them. When you were saying this, it made me think about a time in my career when a leader wanted us to brand a new term for the word biotech.
Mhm.
And I don't know where the term came from. It could have been a shower. I don't know, a drive epiphany. And I don't even remember what the term was, but
Mhm.
it was going to be the new term for biotech. And it just was not working. And
Mhm.
so what I did is I had a listening session, and I brought all these top thought leaders and organizational leaders to a meeting, and I
Mhm.
had it videotaped so he could, or simulcast, so he could listen in.
Mhm.
And I had a facilitator, and then
Mhm.
there were all kinds of, I'm from the South, so I'm going to say folks, all kind of
Mhm.
folks around the table, and the facilitators facilitating all the things we needed to know. And then the facilitator started talking about the term. I wish I could remember. I hope one night it'll come to my brain, but whatever was a new term. At
Mhm.
the end of that discussion, it became very, very clear that it would take years for that term to become ubiquitous
Right.
and millions of dollars. And
Mm-hmm.
so he's listened to the conversation, then, come back and we debrief. And I said, tell me your thoughts about the discussion around the term.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, and because I have a recommendation, but I want to hear your perspective first. And
Mm-hmm.
then I also can tell you what the budget would be for us to launch it.
Right.
And as he was going through it, he heard from other people that it was basically going to be a non-starter. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, so we can move forward with the term and it will cost X.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can adopt the tone, it'll cost Y and we'll own it. Which
Mm-hmm.
would you like? And so we ended up adopting the term and crushing it. But the point that I want to make is the boss gets to decide. You get to
Right.
educate and influence.
Right. Right. Yeah. When Marshall said that in the conversation, that was one of those aha moments, because you just kind of say, ah, yeah, he who has the biggest, ball does get to make all the rules, right? And I mean basketball. I was using a sports reference, not something else. So what are your other three? So we talked.
The third one is I call it, speaking of advocating for yourself.
Mhm,
That
mhm.
is so important because when you don't, so
Right.
practically from a career perspective,
Mhm.
when you don't advocate for yourself, then you don't give yourself a chance to have your thoughts and ideas add to
Right.
the success of the enterprise.
Mhm.
Two, if you can't advocate for yourself, then you don't get the resources that will enable your success.
Right.
And if you can't advocate well for yourself, then you could lose out from anywhere from $500,000 to over $2 million of lifetime wealth accumulation. So
Mhm.
it pays to speak up and learn how
Right.
to use your voice effectively.
Mhm. Yeah, and
And
I think I know I just cut you off a little bit, but I just want to kind of underline that point of learning how to advocate for yourself effectively. Because I do see younger people, to me that's, 40 and under, who are coming into the workplace and they'll say, I'm advocating for myself. And it's like, well, okay, but just saying that you think this is wrong is not advocating for yourself, right? So I think that you mentioned something that's really important, which is know how to advocate for yourself, not just that you need to be able to advocate for yourself. So I just
yeah,
want to kind of bring that in because I think you mentioned a really important point.
and it's interesting. When I came up through my career, there
Mhm.
was this adage that said, when a compromise means that everyone's gonna lose. You're not gonna get what you want. And
Right.
then I would say more modern research says that the best compromise is when both people win. So spend
Right.
extra time when
Hmm.
both people feel like they've gotten what they wanted.
Right.
And so, like, compromise means that you have to give something up, maybe, but the best compromises is when you spend the extra time to figure out what both people want and they win.
Mhm.
But it's also being effective. There is a caveat, though, if you're female, if you speak up for yourself, that you're penalized. And
Right.
so there's some extra work that
Hmm.
you have to do to learn how to negotiate effectively. The fourth I call persevere, and it's really
Hmm.
around having good coping mechanisms to deal with the stress that comes
Hmm.
from a career.
Right.
And the and the reason why that's important is because the less um, the lower your ability to have really good coping mechanisms to help you with
Mhm.
your career, the harder it is for you to keep your self efficacy high. So
Right.
over time, you can get beaten down. So for some
Mhm.
people, it's like not asking for help, not
Right.
having a support system, your own
Mhm.
private board of directors, uh,
Mhm.
good, healthy eating and
Mhm.
weight maintenance practices, sleep, like all of those good hygiene, care hygiene
Right.
things, because then it erodes your self efficacy. Then you lose your voice, all the other things. It's a
Right.
cascade.
Mhm.
And you end up in this dilemma where you stay so long then you really can't move because now you're afraid this is all I've done and I
Mhm.
can't go do something else. So
Right.
maybe you've had a growth mindset where I can learn new things. Now it's fixed. This is all I know. And then
Mhm.
the other part of that is um, not knowing when to leave.
Oh, yeah.
And
Now, is not knowing when to leave and staying too long the same thing?
um, they're close. So
Right.
staying too long is, oh, believing that this too shall pass.
Okay. Okay.
Not knowing when to leave is you wake up every Monday and you dread going into that place every
Mhm.
day. The environment is toxic. You
Right.
know, you know that this is
Mhm.
not a place where you will thrive or
Right.
win, but you
Mhm.
stay anyway. You have to remove yourself from harm's way. Just like in any other time in life, like if you put your toe in hot water and it's too hot, you're going to lift yourself out of it. We teach
Right.
children don't touch a hot stuff. Like
Mhm.
you know when this is not for you. But
Right.
if you but so you got to remove yourself from a bad situation, and that
Mhm.
applies for probably everything in life,
Right, right. But is it
not just your career.
fear? Is it fear that keeps us there? Like I often will say, and I've had an absolutely, wonderful career in by most standards, but it wasn't until, right, exactly. But it wasn't until I was out of corporate. And of course, I had a bit of a different situation going on, but it wasn't until I was out of corporate that I thought or had the recognition that not only was I a bit traumatized by the corporate environment, my word, now, not then, when I've said that, I probably would have said challenged, um, but what was more telling to me was that I knew it and I allowed it. And then when I ask myself why, I really don't necessarily like the answer.
Um, Gosh, a lot to unpack there. So
Right,
what I
right.
will so so um I once heard this term, the pressure is a privilege.
Hmm.
And so the more you ascend, the more
Hmm.
responsibility you have, the pressure that comes with that's a part of the job, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
so I don't know if anyone stops to think about it because
Right.
the presumption is that the pressure, stress, all those
Right.
things is part of the privilege.
Hmm.
And we make, just like we have social contracts with other
Right.
people, we have
Hmm.
social contracts with ourselves, right? I
Right.
will do whatever to get there. And and you're there and you feel the success. And
Hmm.
so the benefits are far outweighing all the other things.
Hmm.
And so you probably don't think about it as much.
Hmm.
And I don't know if in hindsight, if you could do it all over again, you still wouldn't have done it. Right. Maybe you would have
Right.
tweaked some things,
Hmm.
but I have often said it's difficult for me to ever challenge any experience I've ever had because it
Right.
I got so much out of it, both, materially as
Hmm.
well as intellectually and
Right.
personally. These are all our collective experiences.
Mhm.
And so what you're saying for yourself is true, but at the same time, like if you could do it all over again, maybe you might have still done it. I don't know. I don't
I would
know.
have done it
And then the
exactly the same
and
way.
then the fear, I feel fear is real. And I've sat in so many different rooms and worked for so many different organizations. And now I'm at the table with other organizations and leaders and founders and CEOs and board members. Fear is just real. That's part of the human experience. I don't want to diminish it. But fear can also be a driver. Like I remember being afraid many times in my career. I
Hmm.
mean, like, my pipeline praying to God, like, oh Lord, please let me do that. Like, whatever,
Right. Right.
lots of
Right.
fear. But I used to say fear has to be my friend. And
Right.
like if I'm doing something, there's not some fear over there. Okay, am I missing something? Because particularly in my profession, usually I'm doing something no one's ever done before.
Right.
Right. Because, and so like if I'm not afraid, I'm thinking, I must have missed something because I don't want to just be overconfident. So I've looked at fear as my friend,
Right.
like, hey friend, okay, like we're gonna go do this next. And
Yeah.
so it could be fear, but I don't always think having fear is bad.
No,
I
yeah,
feel that's why I focus on self-efficacy. What are things you can
yeah,
do to help you move past it?
right.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I'm totally going to steal the phrase, the pressure is the privilege.
yeah. It
Because
wasn't mine, so I heard
oh, I
someone.
was going to say I'll credit you, but don't be
It was
surprised
mine.
if you see that in my next
Yeah.
TEDx talk or my next keynote or something. But I will give you credit for it. And
But
that,
I heard it.
yeah, and no, you when you were talking and we were talking about fear and fear being your friend, you actually made me think a little bit deeper. And, I wonder if we don't break down fear enough. And what I mean by that is not just get rid of the fear, but there are different types of fear, right?
Right.
Like I always often will say, fear is just false evidence appearing real, right? And I
Yes.
think that's true when it comes to imposter syndrome, right? But to your point, fear is not always bad. And that, there are different kinds of fear. And there are sometimes we should run toward the fear, right? So that we could conquer. But we're often taught to run away from fear, right? And I think that actually goes all the way back to, the very beginnings of humankind. And, you
Okay.
have, if you believe in the cavemen, you feel fear, you run from it, right? But there are
Right.
times that we should run toward fear as well. Um, but also recognize what role fear is playing for us in the moment.
I used to tell my teams when we would bring new team members on, I would say, listen, when we start interviewing these folks, here's what we're looking for. Imagine we're standing on the shore and we're looking at this big wave coming in. We want the people who are going to grab their boards and head towards the water.
Right.
Now, watch out for sharks, you
Hmm.
know,
Right.
anything sharp in the sand.
Yeah.
But, we're looking for people who can ride the wave. That's what we
Right.
want. And
Hmm.
so, that's kind of how I've looked at fear.
Hmm.
And then the other thing is early in my career, I heard this statement, and I should Google who said it, but I haven't yet. But it's imagine what you would do in your life if you didn't have fear.
Right.
And
Hmm.
so whenever I want to do something big or something different, I say to myself, okay, is this fear? I look over for my friend,
Hmm.
is why aren't you doing it? So yeah, it's I think it's helpful. Now I do just want to put a caveat, fear is real.
Right.
It's there for a reason. It's why we're
Right.
still here as a species, and we should pay
Right.
attention to it.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
the final one is I call it educate. It's about being a lifelong learner and just being
Right.
self-aware. And
Hmm.
so here's how that helps with self-efficacy. The more you learn new things, and it doesn't even have to be related to your job, but the more you're training
Right.
your brain to learn new things,
Mhm.
once a new opportunity comes up or a challenge arises, you're so used to learning something new,
Right.
the signals that your brain will send to yourself is not fear danger. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, something else. And
Right.
so it helps boost your self efficacy. And the
Mhm.
broader your self awareness, and you can get that through taking an assessment or just asking for feedback and
Right.
being open to the feedback, particularly if it's constructive, is that then you're learning your blind spots so that you
Mhm.
won't be derailed
Right.
and you can be present when you move into a new opportunity. And
Right.
so that's why, so that's the those are the steps that I help people
Right.
with. But the other thing I wanted to just dial back is actually
Mhm.
communications wasn't my entire career. Communications was my
Ah.
third career.
Oh, I did not realize, as long as I've known you, and I did not realize that.
Yeah, so when people ask me about my background, I actually was a history of art major in college and interned at museums and started my first job was at a museum and then I had a contract at another museum. And so the
Mhm.
first 7 years of my career, I worked like 7 days a week
Mhm.
and I started my career at working in museums. And so my dream was to be the CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but I had a whole plan. Like it
Of
was
course you did.
you know, but no, but things happened and I changed, and that's when I went into um, more like public service,
Mhm.
human services, And then I made my way quite serendipitously to communications full time because I was doing cause related marketing on these large national campaigns working with celebrities. And at that time in the mid 90s, the pharmaceutical companies started working with celebrities. Remember those talk to your doctor campaigns featuring
Right.
your favorite actor
Mhm.
or celebrity? And so I was recruited to a PR agency to start working on those campaigns
Interesting.
on behalf of pharmaceutical companies. And so
Mhm.
that's how I started doing public relations. And 2 weeks into the job, a counterpart left the company and I was given a development opportunity to also go do crisis communications.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
talk about trial by fire. So kind of left brain, right brain. I was helping launch these $1 billion products and at
Mhm.
the same time protecting these $1 billion brands.
Right, right.
And so that was like 20 years ago. And that's how I got into communications.
You know what? That explains a lot about you, actually, as long as I've known you and not known that little fact. That actually explains a lot because you're so there are so many layers to you and to the way you look at your career that that pulls it all together in my mind. Not that it matters that it's pulled together in my mind, but that pulls it all together in my mind. So of course, we could talk forever, but I can't take
Yeah.
up all of your time. So I do have to ask you our final question, of course, which since the whole, show is around in a way, using your term, self-efficacy, right?
Yeah.
Which I kind of talk about from the standpoint of self-leadership and self-belief. But all of that really leads us into the point of I think in order to have self-efficacy, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but in order to have that, you have to have just an intrinsic belief in your value and your capability. So tell us about when you realized, and maybe you've always had it, I mean, when you realized that you could confidently say to yourself, I am enough.
So thankfully, probably because of the way I was raised, I've always had high confidence. And I know that because people would always tell me that. And I would think to myself, well, why wouldn't I be confident? But okay. But the self-efficacy part actually happened you think back to your career, you're sitting around with your peers and you're complaining about blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And I remember sitting in a room with leaders who were maybe like 3 levels higher than I was.
Mhm.
And they were having the same conversations as I was having. And
Yeah.
I thought to myself, gosh, there's no difference. And they
Mhm.
were all men actually, but there's no
Mhm.
difference between them and myself. Like all they have is more time and experience and maybe some
Right.
opportunity. I'm going to go get that time and experience and opportunity and create it for myself.
Right.
And then when there have been people who have challenged it,
Mhm.
I think back to something that my best friend, her mom used to say, they're West Indian background, can't argue with a fool. Like, okay. And so inside, if someone challenges me over something I know to be true, like I can always learn and grow and listen. But if I know it to be true
Right.
about myself and you're coming for me, if I say if we keep it in the community, I'm just quiet because I don't have to argue.
Right.
And so like you do you, I'm good. I grew
Mhm.
up in Detroit too. And so I have that bravado that people who are Detroiters
Right.
have. But yeah, I learned that early. And then
Uh-huh.
I set out to make a plan for myself. And now I've had, the amazing career and I
Mhm.
feel really privileged to be able to help other people go win.
Right, right. Well, yeah, I mean, I would say more than you've had a great career. I'd say you have a great career because the chapter that you're in has been pretty fantastic too. And
Thank
I
you.
think
Thank
in a
you.
lot of ways you're probably just getting started. There's a lot that you had to offer the world.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank
so
you.
I think that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So thanks for being
And
here.
I also we didn't talk about this, but what also has made a difference for me were mentors and role models.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember you being a role model for me early in my career. And I remember one of my first executive roles, and I reached out to you. And I don't think you really knew me. Like, you knew of me. Like, who's this person? How did you get down? But I just remember how gracious you were and how grateful I was that you extended your knowledge and time to help me be successful. And that's so important that we have people in our lives that way,
Right.
and that people pay it forward.
Right.
And I think that because you were such a great role model and mentor in our profession, it was easy for me to go do it and pay forward for others. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's well, if you don't pay it forward, then all those hard-won lessons are for naught, right?
Right.
Right. If you just keep them to yourself. So
Right.
anyway, so see, wasn't that fun, Candace?
It was.